What is going on, YouTube? Culturedog Sam Hatch back with another video, and it's about a year in on this whole little adventure I've been doing with the Culturedog channel. Started last year around this exact same time with the results of my 2014 Halloween horror movie challenge, where I tried to watch 31 horror movies, one movie for each day of the month of October. And I figured, let's do it again this year. Let's do it for 2015 and see how it goes. 2015 was a really busy year for me, and this month in particular was no slouch. So we're going to see how well I fared and if I pulled through the challenge or not. And you'll know some of these titles already because I've already dropped reviews of the Tales from the Crypt reissues from Scream Factory and also the Army of Darkness. And likewise, thanks for all the cool feedback regarding my review. I had the review out and ink was dry before all of the talk about the glitches. Glitches plural now. Apparently there's one on the theatrical cut disc, and there's a couple missing seconds on the international cut. I didn't notice them. I'm sorry. Yeah, I probably never would have known the international cut was missing 2 seconds. As big a fan of the film as I am, yeah. But for the people that are going to want replacement copies, etc., there is at least a replacement copy in the works for the theatrical cut on disc 1, wherein apparently there was 2 seconds missing and the audio was still playing, and I didn't get a chance to go back and check for the glitch again after I heard about it. Again, I didn't notice it. So, it's one of those things. It's not going to bother some people at all, and then some people are going to be proclaiming that Shout Factory should all commit seppuku. And there's plenty of that online. So, it's an interesting kind of mix of reactions there. But yeah, if you're looking to get a replacement copy, they are forthcoming apparently. So get in touch with Scream Shout Factory and let them know. But anyways, back to the rest of the horror shenanigans that was going on. So what do we watch? Usually we do a kind of one-on-one-off selection. I choose one, my wife chooses one, etc. So I figured I'd let her start off, and she chose a perennial, The Conjuring, which of course we talked about last year. I was also on my list, and it's just one of those things we're going to watch probably all the time now. James Wan's flick, which normally I'm not a huge fan of some of his stuff, though I do like the Insidious films. It's great Blu-ray, great sound, lots of cool, aggressive surround stuff going on in there. And it's a fun throwback to 70s filmmaking. It takes place in the 70s in Rhode Island, a purportedly true story of a haunting that the Warrens investigated. And being a Connecticut person for all my life, I'm well keyed into the case histories of the Warrens, so it was interesting seeing a film about them when I'd seen their seminars, etc., going back decades. So yeah, classic flick. Still seems to be holding up a few years on, especially the performances. Really good stuff from Lily Taylor, and awesome flick. Anyways, so The Conjuring, we had to check that out. So then I jumped in with Scream Factory's Collector's Edition of Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. If you want to see what I thought about it, there is a review up and running right now. Just pop back a few videos, or maybe I'll put the link down below as well. But good reissue, lots of extras too. Oh, I forgot to mention, that's the one sad thing about The Conjuring. There's really not that much on it for extras. No commentary track or whatever, so that's pretty sad. This, however, is loaded with quality extras, and is definitely worth picking up if you're a fan of the film, which I am. And we moved from there on to The Omen. I had picked up the DVD box set that had come out back when the Omen remake came out on home video, so maybe that was like 2006, 2007. That probably squeaked out at the end of 2006. But now there's a Blu-ray collection, so we picked it up, and it is in some horrible packaging. But we got the Omen collection, and it has the same material as that other box set, but minus the TV fourth movie, because apparently it's standard def, and that just didn't work out. So we watched the original 1976 Gregory Peck. The packaging in this thing is, you might as well just have these discs like stacked like loose. There's really no protection this thing offers them, and it's kind of a shame. And you do anything and they all just slide out and fly around. So I'm going to get some Elite cases and get these properly stored in something, because this is a horrible excuse for special edition packaging. That said, the HD transfer of the original Omen looks great. Gregory Peck, David Warner's segment of the film where they just kind of run around trying to uncover the truth behind Gregory Peck's son Damien. That's always the stuff that I always enjoyed the most. So it's more of a kind of I guess religious thriller than it is a deep, pee your pants horror film. But still holds up. Really good stuff. Richard Donner does some great directing. Then we moved on to some more Ty West stuff. I'm trying to catch up with my Ty West things, and I really enjoyed The Innkeepers. And I enjoyed his segment in the first VHS as well, and I figured I would check this out. So we fired up Sacrament, the film from 2013 that he did. And it's got A.J. Bowen, and it's got a guy named Kentucker in it, which makes me kind of want to... I don't know if I want to slap the guy named Kentucker or his family for naming him Kentucker. But Kentucker, oddly, Joe Swanberg is in it, and Gene Jones is fantastic. But it's this tale of... it's a pseudo found footage documentary, tale of a guy who works for Vice magazine. So it's got that, crossover into reality. Whose sister has gone missing in a cult, or at least suspected cult. And she has now kind of reached out and said that he can go visit her. And now she's down possibly in South America. And so it follows this camera crew and a group of journalists as they go down to see what's going on this compound and see if it's legit. And meet this character named The Father, played by Gene Jones, who's just electric. His performance is amazing. And it has to be because he's playing a character who gives off an electric performance as this personality that these people are drawn to, like moths to a flame. A lot of people complain about the slow burn on this film. I love the slow burn. I thought there was just this kind of like roiling, gut-churning tension that was going on throughout it, because it's going to go wrong. And it does go wrong in more ways than one, unfortunately. It clearly is taking inspiration from the Jim Jones cult and the massacre that followed thereon. And so I thought, all right, well, that's an interesting concept for a found footage horror film. Like, you take that kind of Jim Jones cult as your basis and then you build on it. And then so this also had to follow up on the cult found footage segment within VHS 2, which was pretty insane. So you're expecting it to follow this kind of path for a while and then sprout wings and turn into something really interesting and supernatural and crazy. And then come to find out it's just a retelling of the Jim Jones massacre, but without using any of the original names. And I think it's weird. It's a biopic that's not officially a biopic, and it loses a lot of power because of that. And I've already seen a great documentary about the real Jim Jones massacre, and it just kind of like vomits on itself, and then the whole thing falls apart and loses all its power that had been building up until that point. So I was sad to say, like, it could have been something great, really, and then it just comes out as just a retelling of something I've heard told a little bit more fascinating in other circles, and the fact that they then changed all the names of the characters and everything, so it just seems kind of cheap. I don't know. So, The Sacrament, awesome and a total disappointment at the same time. So then we moved on to some more Omen stuff. Fired up Damien the Omen 2 from 1978, and that film kind of holds up for me more as I watch it over time, especially some of the supporting cast. Lance Henriksen's really interesting as a military school instructor who's one of the people that are possibly of demonic influence that are looking out for Damien and making sure he's on the right path, the left-hand path, so to speak. But there's a really cool kind of, Christ-like, this is the Antichrist, but there's that whole fully human yet fully demonic, in this case, conflict within Damien. And that's kind of the meat and potatoes of the story. William Holden is the Gregory Peck of this story. You can just tell there's a suit, like, give me another important actor. It worked the last time. And he's the relative of Gregory Peck's character in the first film. And so now he's taken Damien into his fold. And Damien's found this kind of brotherhood and kinship with his cousin. So there's the tragedy in that. Whereas if he actually becomes, Satan's child, he's going to have to break free from his ties with his human friends that aren't necessarily evil at heart. So that stuff actually had some good juju to it. I was impressed. From there, we moved on to the much maligned Tales from the Crypt presents Bordello of Blood, and I've also dropped a review of this online. You can check it out, and I detail all the madness of the making of this film and how Dennis Miller was not a very likable character, or so some of the other people weren't likable actors or actresses either, and but it's great extras on this thing. It looks as good as you'll ever see it, and if you're a fan of the film, do check it out. And of course, my wife was hot on her Omen kick at the moment, so we fired this back up and went into the Omen 3, The Final Conflict, which, that's an interesting flick. It's from the early 80s, and it's got Sam Neill in probably the first role I ever saw him in as a grown Damien. And the kind of is he or isn't he stuff that was in the first film that kind of gave it its kick in the pants, and kind of tormented the main character. That's all gone here. He is the son of the devil. He is the Antichrist, and he's gaining power. And so, a lot of that, the mystery is gone from it. But that said, it starts off with like a kind of dark heart. It's got some mean-spirited nastiness to it, including a politician who very loudly commits suicide in front of press and peers in a pretty amazing scene for a 80s horror film, because the 80s was very tame in some regards, especially in its mainstream horror films. So the only downside is that the kind of darkness and the creepiness of the film does kind of get truncated towards the end, and there's like a little kind of happy sappy moment or two, but not quite as bad as some of the other films that followed a few years later, where everything's got really sappy for a period and everything had a kind of Spielberg feel-good aspect to it. But there's some interesting grit to that film. So then we followed up with a film I'd been meaning to revisit after I saw it in the theaters and was initially disappointed, the unrated edition of Paranormal Activity 4. And these films are marketed sometimes wrong. The third film had trailers that showed tons of footage that wasn't in the film, though I really like that. That's one of my favorites, if not my favorite of the whole series. This fourth one was promising to be, the film that the newest film, The Ghost Dimension, is, that ties up most of the questions, and it was all the activity has led up to this, but this is less of a mythology booster really than the third film was, so it was kind of a step back. That said, I really like the characters in this sucker, and I thought, the actors are just very natural, and and apparently everything really is scripted. Everything feels ad-lib, but apparently it's not, and this is all pretty intricately scripted, even though it has that kind of found footage, naturalistic vibe about it. But I really dug the characters, but I just didn't find it very scary the first time I saw it, and it isn't terrifying in the unrated version, but it's got more juju to it. It flows better. It's got a little bit more satisfaction, and then not having the preconceived notion that this was going to spill all the details that we've been waiting for in the mythology of the series. So I thought it played a lot better on home video, and the unrated edition in particular. And this comes with some cool extras, including a lot of deleted scenes that are I like the kind of tact they're taking with the home video incarnations of this series, wherein they're not doing commentary tracks, etc., and trying to tear away the mystery. I mean, obviously the filmmakers are giving interviews on a regular basis to the media, but they're not packing these Blu-ray sets with the actors on set and the directors and all that stuff. They're really playing it as if it's found footage all the way. So I kind of appreciate that, even though I wish I could see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff and how some of the special effects were created, etc. But so then we moved on to the film I hadn't seen yet, so I figured I'd check it out on home video for the first time, Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones. And this was, originally it wasn't even supposed to come out in theaters, but then I guess it did come out in theaters, but not really around where I was, or at least it was like a blip and I missed it, so I didn't get a chance to check it out. So again, I fired up the unrated version, and I really enjoyed this one. I mean, it was kind of disingenuous that it has a departure from the rest of the series, because this was the Latino cast version of Paranormal Activity. So for once, it's not in these very sterile, sparsely decorated, upper middle class white people's domiciles. But that said, it was kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of cheesy that they're like, "Well, this is the Latino version, so they'll be in dirty houses and they'll be gangbangers." And like, wasn't there someone that was Latino in this mythology in California that actually had a nice house that matched the style of the previous houses? So it was kind of weird that they had to do that. I mean, I understand that there was a character in this that ties in with the other characters of the films. So that aside, though, I really liked how this wove itself into the series, and I really don't like when horror films have mythologies a lot of times when they explain things, because that is the absolute opposite of terror. That's the anti-terror, knowing things and having structure and meaning and all that stuff. That said, I really like the mythology of this series. And every time they unveil something new, it doesn't annoy me at all for some reason, which is interesting. And I liked how this wrapped up into elements of the second film and the third film, etc. And I really dug it. I thought the actors again were really good and naturalistic, and had a good vibe to it. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. So then we moved on to the most terrifying film I've ever seen. Actually, I hadn't seen it in the theater, so I figured I'd check it out because I got it for $5 from FYE. Hotel Transylvania. And yeah, it's some silly stuff. Yeah, I was a fan of Genndy Tartakovsky's work, Dexter's Laboratory, and of course his work on the Powerpuff Girls on Cartoon Network. So figured I had to check this out. Robert Smigel doing some writing on there. And it's fun emaugh. It's not exactly killer material. There's a lot of hokiness and campy cheese to be found there. And there's a lot of thematic elements that don't exactly make sense on first ponderance, the whole nature of vampires and how they can procreate and everything like that. But yeah, you kind of have to let that stuff go and just kind of run with the fun of it. And the fun of it is largely in the side characters, including, he's not even on the cover there, but Steve Buscemi's Wolfman character is kind of the hoot of the film for me. So yeah, it was cool checking that out finally. And then we moved on to a film that is not really a horror film, come to find out, much like Sacrament wasn't really a horror film after all. But it's an interesting 70s curiosity called Audrey Rose, Marsha Mason, and Anthony Hopkins, and John Beck from Rollerball fame. And this was a film that was kind of jumping onto a late 70s curiosity over the concept of reincarnation. And Anthony Hopkins is this gentleman who is following this family around New York City and is convinced that this family's daughter is possibly connected to a daughter of his own. And it is a little absurd in just how completely unself-conscious his character is. I mean, he just is so adamant that they listen to him, and he's so sincere and it just has no consideration at all for their feelings or the strangeness of his story. So Anthony Hopkins comes off like a total lunatic. But much like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which was a kind of horror thriller that largely was a courtroom drama, this film is very similar. It quickly becomes a tale of did Anthony Hopkins' character do something against the law in the name of saving this character who has these regular freakouts, and it's possibly tied into a death of another little girl. So, and he clearly did break the law. So I don't know what that whole lawsuit and trial is all about, but it's some interesting scenes in there, and it's definitely not your usual 70s horror flick. It feels like it's going to be an Exorcist knockoff, but it definitely kind of veers off a path and is definitely not very dark as the film progresses. But so we're going to take a break. We'll come back with the rest of the Halloween goodies, and hopefully you guys are having a fun time, and hopefully you got to see some cool Halloween films yourself over the past month. Cheers!